So welcome. Ronnie Landis is a leading expert in holistic health mastery, natural nutrition, and human potential optimization. He serves a broad spectrum of people from driven entrepreneurs, athletes, visionary artists, actors, actresses, and intuitive healers to stay-at-home parents to perform at their zenith mentally, emotionally, and physically. Ronnie's work ranges from exploring the fringes of cutting-edge health sciences, food-based nutrition, innovative supplementation strategies, and a deep passion for helping people liberate from long-held mental and emotional challenges so they can experience every area of life at their full potential. Ronnie is a public speaker and teacher, a published author of multiple books, host of 2 popular podcasts, peak performance coach, and above all, a man who deeply values life and has devoted his to inspiring and positively impacting as many people as possible through his mission, message, and service.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That was incredible.
Well, you are incredible. So I just want to give a personal introduction and just pour praise into you for being the bold, courageous, brilliant, virtuous man that I know you to be, who is deeply committed to your service and your work in the world and optimizing your capacity to thrive, as well as helping other people do the same. So it is an honor and a privilege and a blessing to have you on today. So, yeah, welcome.
Well, thank you, Solara. I just want to say thank you so much. Coming from you and just hearing those words and just the vibration, the energy that you emanate so naturally, and the level of respect and adoration I have for you, just, it's amazing. Yeah, just feels really amazing. I'm super excited to be here and to be able to be a guest on your incredible show. We got to do an awesome interview on my podcast a couple weeks ago, which was incredible. And thank you for having me on.
Yes, my pleasure and honor. So first thing that I want to ask you is, so I know that you grew up in the realm of martial arts, and I know that that is for me, it feels like a beauty-rich, powerful, potent art and craft that instills discipline and a strong foundation of values. So what started your journey in holistic health? So how did you make that shift? Because I feel like the two worlds probably intertwine. So I'd love to hear from you, about your journey and what got you to where you are now.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for contextualizing that for me. Okay, so there's a few different steps to it. So the first place is basically how I got started in martial arts. So when I was 4 years old, my first conscious memory on this planet, incarnated in this body, was actually seeing a movie called Enter the Dragon. So that was Bruce Lee's last famous movie he made before he passed away. And I don't know what it was, but that was literally the first thing I remember when I look back on my childhood. And it somehow imprinted this iconography, this idea of a real life superhero. And that idea and that inspiration and that notion of what's possible pretty much followed me along my entire life. And martial arts, I was raised in martial arts. So when I saw that movie, like somehow certain timelines came together and I was put into martial arts. I fell in love with it and really grew up. So I grew up in martial arts, studying many, many different disciplines. So we have some cats in the background. That's what that noise is. So studying many different disciplines and philosophies, Eastern philosophy in particular, and really being focused on the physicality and the competition and the combativeness of martial arts. So martial arts it's the art form, and then it's the martial aspect, which is really the militaristic aspect, self-defense, fighting techniques, all that kind of thing. And then applying the art of it, which is really, it's really the philosophy. And that's something that Bruce Lee always really talked about, which is that you have to have the mind and the body aligned. And so it's not just physical mastery, but it's mental mastery, emotional mastery, which leads to applying more of a spiritual directive to the martial arts practice versus just it being like a sport, it being just something you do, or, you want to be people in today's culture, it's like the UFC. Not to say that there's not any true martial artists doing that, but it's more focused on the sport. It's more focused on the culture, not so much on the authentic art. So anyways, I was raised in that, and I was an Olympic hopeful for Taekwondo in my early 20s. And that was my dream. That was the thing that consumed me, that compelled all of my actions. That's actually what got me off a particular path in my life where I could have gone one way or the other, pretty much being fully devoted to my path and my passion and my art and my goals, or doing what most people do, going off in like just, frivolous dating in high school, or going to parties and getting drunk and getting high. And so I was kind of like at this crossroad. And when I was 15, one day I was running track, and like something stopped me. Like, so I was running around the track, and then I got kind of stopped. It's like something stopped my body, and it was almost like a lightning bolt of insight came into me, and it was like a voice was talking to me, but it wasn't my voice. And the voice said, "Do you think you're going to live forever?" And it just completely halted me. And after that moment, I got the whole vision, I got the whole download, and I realized that I needed to pick a direction. And so it became super clear. I stopped going to parties, I stopped hanging out with certain people, and I just focalized all of my energy and my effort towards martial arts and towards getting into tournaments and competing full time and really taking this inspiration seriously. And so, from 15 on, I was pretty much single-mindedly focused on martial arts and going to the Olympics. That was like my end game goal. And so when I was 18 years old, I was really starting to make a name for myself in the local tournament circuit. I was winning tournaments. Everything was moving along. And then I had my first knee injury. It was on my right knee. I tore my meniscus. And so just through wear and tear, just like overtraining, and not getting enough rest or rehabilitation that I needed, not really knowing anything about that, really not knowing how to treat the body, not knowing how to take care of the body, just knowing how to push the body. And so that was my first kind of like stop sign. And I remember really clearly, one of my martial arts friends had told me, he said, "You've spent your entire life training your body. Now you need to train your mind." And that was like the first moment in my life where I started to take that seriously, taking learning and studying and philosophy and my potential for learning and accelerated learning. I got really deep into reading books, reading everything I could, inspiring biographies, philosophy books, sports, mechanics, all that kind of stuff. And so that's a little bit about the journey. But long story short, how I got into nutrition was a couple of years later. I had the knee surgery. I spent 1.5 years rehabilitating, and I got myself back to where I could compete in the tournament circuit again. And so I was doing that, and I was national tournaments. I competed in the US Open. And that was really like the first step to going, trying out for the US national team and all that. So before it got to that level, and there's a lot of stories embedded into all this, by the way, there's a lot of crazy destiny pivot stories, which are really, really fascinating, actually helped mold my character, the decisions I had to make about my life and my goals, and the sacrifices I had to make in order to do the right thing, which we can talk about more. But basically, just to finish this train of thought, so I had another knee surgery from a knee injury a couple of years after the first one. And that's when I stumbled into the whole world of food. It seems crazy to me now thinking about it because it's so obvious. But back then, I had never really eaten real food, like fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, sprouts, fermented foods, like organic food, plant-based food, even organic animal foods. Like I was on the complete opposite spectrum where most people are, which is just the standard American fare, just genetically modified foods, commercial foods, conventional factory farm foods, processed food, all of it. I started getting better and better, but my version of health food was like an upgraded form of junk food. So we think of like junk vegan food, right? That's not my message. That's not where I'm trying to lead people now, but that's kind of like a similar equivalent, right? But then something compelled me to take the food thing a lot more seriously. And then I got on YouTube University, and this is back in 2007 or something like that. And I started researching different diets on YouTube. I came across some really incredible characters preaching about organic food. And then eventually I found out about the raw food movement and living foods and vegan and vegetarianism. And then that really just opened up a completely, wide open door for me. I felt in alignment with the ethics in the philosophy of vegan and vegetarianism, in the Ayurvedic philosophy of ahimsa, do no harm to others and also do no harm to ourselves, and really care for this body temple and really nourish ourselves with life force containing food. And so this idea of life force in our food was completely absent on me until I got into it. And so basically, to summarize the final point of this, I got into all this. I was, and I still had nagging knee injuries. I still had like inflammation, wear and tear, scar tissue. I wasn't completely healed. So I had to ice my knees 3 times a day because I'd work out 3 times a day. That was for about 10 years straight. That was like a professional Olympic athlete schedule. And so I remember after every workout, I would have a big bag of ice tied to my knees, like every day. I just adapted to it. And so I got inspired to basically do a 100% all raw food diet, no animal products, no cooked food, no processed food, just fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, fermented foods, sprouted foods, and grasses, grass powders. I think that's when I got into things like spirulina, and then juices. That's all I did for 30 days. I just asked myself, what would happen if I adopted a 100% living food diet for 30 days? Because I had heard about all these amazing healing stories, people losing in upwards to 300 to 400 pounds, people literally reversing conditions that were previously incurable conditions. And I'm just walking into this. So I'm just like, whoa, this must be the Holy Grail. This must be the thing that everybody is missing. Definitely sounds like the thing that I'm missing. And so I did that, and lo and behold, in 30 days, I healed both of my knees completely, to the point where for a couple of years, I had not been able to run. I used to run 5 miles every single day, and I loved it. It was cathartic. It was like an act of meditation. But I had not been able to do that because I just was scared of re-injuring my knee. And so what was really interesting about this experience, and this is what led me into doing the work that I've been doing for about 11 or 12 years now, is there was this favorite mountain. It's like this really big hill where I grew up at, and it had this 5-mile loop, and I would always go there as my favorite place to go. And I don't know what possessed me, but I found myself driving there as if I never had the injuries. This is just a normal thing. I put on my headphones and I literally run the whole 5-mile loop. It's like high, almost straight inclines, like really intense. And I found myself doing the whole 5 miles. And then I come back after all the endorphins wear out. And all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, what just happened? Like I snapped back into the awareness that I was injured. And so immediately I'm getting a little scared. I start bouncing around and checking my knees, and no inflammation, no pain. And I had the biggest insight around healing and transformation, which was that not only was I out of pain, but I had forgotten that I was ever in pain to begin with.
Yes. That's so profound right there in and unto itself. And it feels like you're tapping into a pure flow state too, which has also been shown to have similar effects. So I'm curious to know how that shift in your life impacted your performance mentally, emotionally. I mean, I imagine physically, obviously, it went through the roof.
Yeah, majorly. I mean, it was really the ultimate sports performance enhancement tool, because now I'm 34. I just turned 34. And I've been playing basketball just on and off lately. And I was also a semi-professional basketball prospect at one point as well. So I was a two-sport athlete.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been playing basketball lately, and I'm not really training. I mean, I work out every day, but not like I used to. 34 years old, and I was just as quick, just as explosive, just as mentally strong, if not more mentally strong than I was before, and able to do almost everything I could do before. And yet I seem to be even more intelligent in terms of my ability of pacing. You know, I seem to be more in the zone. If I had the same kind of embodiment or mentality back then who knows? Obviously, the health thing was a major issue, but so, you know, to that point, the enhancement aspect of it has been, you know, astronomical. So like that was about, I want to think that was about 10, 11 years ago when I really had that moment of kind of awakening, if you will. So up until, you know, these last 10, 11 years, I mean, as far as like my mental focus and my mental strength, it's like night and day, you know, because before I was very mentally strong as an athlete and kind of more as like a warrior archetype. I still have that very, very much so, but it's different. It's just, there's more of a flexibility. There's more of an adaptability. There's more of a lucidness. There's a lot there. I almost feel like I need you to kind of reel me in and kind of like refocus the question, because like there's a few different things that are coming to mind right now.
Yeah. So, okay, here, let me feel into this for a moment. With the way that we are evolving exponentially as a species, what are some key things that we can do in our modern world now to improve those things, enhance lucidity, clarity, mental focus, flexibility, so the capacity to generate, you know, new neural pathways and new brain cells and all of this, and to stay pure and clean and clear in a world that's filled with so much toxicity. So what are your best tips for that, for raising our performance and just our capacity really to flourish, because we feel our best when we're in those flow states and we're fully connected to the present moment? So
right. Okay, awesome way to refocus the question. Okay, I'll get to that question. It's a brilliant question. But I just realized the thing that I wanted to get across in the last question was all the limitations were taken off. So there was a freedom. That was really what I wanted to get to, was that because the limitation built into my mind and my awareness was that somehow I was, not that I was broken, but something was broken. And I didn't want to re-break it. So there was always this legitimate concern for how far I could go, what I could do, all that kind of thing, right? And how far can I actually take this thing out realistically? Like, what's my life going to look like in a couple of years or 10 years from now? So all the limitations were kind of taken off, and all of a sudden it opened up just infinite possibilities. So you can imagine how that plays out when an athlete all of a sudden realizes they have no limitations. It just leads to like exponential flow states, performance, endurance, energy levels, quickness, whatever the particular arena, whatever the context of the sport is, or you know, whatever other area of life. I mean, it just freed me up in ways that I can't even begin to synthesize here. So yeah, wanted to get to that.
Thank you for that. That's huge and applicable in so many areas of life. So thank you for bringing that forward.
100%. I mean, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to take down the walls of limitation so we can actually liberate and free ourselves, right? Okay, your second question, a little bit of a bigger question. So let me kind of just try to synthesize this, or try to explain in a way that doesn't take too long, because there's so much there. You know, we could do multiple talks just on that topic. So really what I heard you talking about is, how do we activate genius, right? And so the first thing is that we have to know that there is intrinsic genius built inside of us. There's seeds of genius actually do exist in all of us. It's not just in historical figures or made up mythological figures, or maybe people that we might associate as intellectually genius, like maybe like, I don't know, Elon Musk or Steve Jobs or whoever the flavor of the generation is in terms of like, you know, who's the entrepreneur, who's the inventor, who's the artist, performer. What I like to tell people is that if you resonate with someone, that tells you more about yourself than it does about them. So I think that's really the first key before we get into anything having to do with nutrition or lifestyle or quote unquote optimization, because we have to optimize our own self-belief first, right?
Yes.
Otherwise, the rest of it are just like, they're just tools that become expensive supplementation that can really amplify and up level our energetic capacity. But if we don't know what to do with it, then we can actually burn ourselves out. I mean, that's the whole supplement community, the whole supplement field, is that you have so many people that haven't localized what it is that they're here to do. What do they want to do? What kind of contribution do they want to make? What's meaningful to them? A lot of people are living in other people's value systems. So they're trying to adopt somebody else's mission in replacement for discovering their own. And so I think our genius is locked up in what we're here to do, what's actually meaningful to us, because there's an infinite vault of energy locked up in that.
Right.
So maybe that, yeah.
Well, I was going to say, it just even feels like per the moment, knowing how to direct that energy. So it's like we get all this energy on board, and then what do we do with it? How do we direct it? Where are we channeling it and flowing it? And for what purpose?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And
yeah.
So, okay. So let's talk about genius for a moment. So what are the qualities of genius to you? So how would somebody know if they're accessing and tapping into their genius? Because I think that there's a field of genius that is if we are all to be an awakened, the highest state of self-actualization, self-realization, it would be that field of infinite potentiality that we all are. So the singularity, and we all have access to that. And we usually just tap into it. And these moments of epiphany or revelation, or there's an opening and it comes through. So what is it, and how can we stay connected to it?
Wow. Okay. Well, I think the word genius loosely has the word gene in it. So so back to this original point that your genius is inherent from within you, right? And there's this quote that I always bring up whenever I talk about this, which is from one of the great mystics and really the great inventors of the last 100 years, if not in history, Walter Russell. He had a book called The Genius Inherent in Everyone. And when you open up the book, it has the most profound quote, which is, mediocrity is self-inflicted, genius is self-bestowed. And so when we understand that, then it becomes a question of like, okay, then we need to study our genetics, or more to the point, epigenetics, right? And how do our lifestyle factors, our external environment, our relationships, the emotional stimulus, the dominant emotional states that we're in, are we in a fight, flight, or freeze sympathetic nervous system overload where we're constantly on stress, constantly on red alert, constantly sussing out survival-based worries and concerns? Or are we able to liberate those fantastical fears that we tend to make up or tend to live in, let's just say? Are we able to free that energy up and redirect it in a more meaningful and more inspirational vision of some sort? Call that your goal, if you will, or whatever you want to put your energy into. You have to look at that. Where is your dominant emotional state? Where is your psychological state? Are you locked into the noosphere of the collective, unconscious psyche? Or are you creating agency and autonomy within yourself, meaning that I'm not affected, or to the degree that I'm capable of not being affected by the good opinions of other people, just basic, right? Like just not being, how affected am I by other people? And then also understanding that there's a psychic phenomenon that we are all to some extent connected to the field. They call it that the noosphere, the psychic field. And those are a little deeper things, but it's psychological protection, it's emotional stability, it's physiological. And so when we look at the body, we then have to look at like, okay, how do the choices I'm making with my body, with how I'm nourishing myself, how I'm feeding myself, my movement patterns are a huge aspect of that. How do all of those affect my genetic sequences, my epigenetic triggers? And then the other thing that gets brought into that too is also lineage-based genetics. You know, so from an epigenetic perspective, we're more affected by our grandparents' generation than we are just our parents. It kind of has a skip over effect, right? So for a lot of us, that's a good thing, because for many of us, our parents' generation were the ones that really got into the processed foods and really were more affected by all the environmental toxicity that got spewed into our environment around the 1940s. So the 1940s, 1960s, whatever. That's really important, right? But without going into a long tangential on all of that, I just take it back to this principle of how do we honor the body? How do we take care of the physical body? Well, the first place we have to start is with our nutrition. I mean, that to me is the greatest access point. That was the greatest access point for me when I started this whole journey. That's what opened up everything. And so genius, I'm circling back to your question about this, and we can keep going down this track as well, as far as like, you know, what to do, how to optimize, but I'm kind of tying a few different things together. So to me, a genius is somebody that actually acts like a genius, right? And what do I mean by that? Well, I mean that you act on your awareness. First of all, if you're aware that you have genius, then you got to start acting like it. Meaning, don't do self-defeating behaviors, things that you know are detrimental, things that you know are pulling you away from your genius, pulling you away from your destiny. And then when you become aware of the whole food phenomenon and taking care of the physical body, then you have to access a level of genius, meaning you're going to become a student of this. I'm going to become a student of this human body, because this human body is like an avatar that's carting me around. I better take care of this thing. I better really actually, you know, put as much of an investment into taking care of this, and also discovering what are the possibilities for this physical body. What would happen if I start fueling myself different? Does my food affect my mental faculties? And the answer is like 100% yes. If anything was affecting our mental faculties, then what else would it be other than food? So those are just a few little thoughts. I mean, I could go on and on your one question. There's so much depth to it.
Yeah, and that was absolutely brilliant in studying. So thank you for streaming all of that through. Incredibly helpful. And so an interesting insight that was coming through as you were sharing that I would love to receive your feedback on is you're speaking into believing in yourself. And something that I have found with accessing my own personal genius is that I must get outside of myself completely. So it's a different frame beyond any type of identification or image or status that I have created for my sovereign autonomous being. It's tapping into that field of genius and perceiving myself from that level of perception, and then acting from that space. Otherwise, I can start to feel like I'm limited. And that's where, you know, those limiting patterns come in that we end up having to break through and figure out how to do so, which also opens and expands the mind to an incredibly just intelligent field of awareness, perception, data, information that we wouldn't have access to otherwise if we were just in our own, you know, inside of our own self. So I would love for you to speak to if you feel that and you recognize that within your own self, and what is that like? What is it like to live from the perspective of the quantum self?
That's only you could frame such an amazing question. So basically what I'm hearing is working from the outcome, right? Or reverse engineering like the highest possibility.
Yeah, and living from, I mean, you know, yeah, we speak into often how to upgrade or
Mhm.
optimize our lives by upgrading our self-image, our status, the way we
Mhm.
perceive
Mhm.
ourselves, the way that we
Okay.
perceive
Yeah.
ourselves is how the world perceives ourselves. What if we just go there? What if we
Right.
just be source?
Okay. Yeah. Completely. I agree 100%. And so, yeah, this actually is the principle that I've been living for most of my life. Once I heard that voice and I got serious about my path, it wasn't like I could just live in increments, right? Like I had a goal and a vision for my life so far beyond where I was. I mean, I was convinced that I was going to be an Olympic athlete,
Mhm.
right? And I'm already 15 years old. I'm already like not quite as far along as, you know, where I thought that I should be, because this is something that people are literally groomed for, from a young age. Now, I studied martial arts from a very early age, but I didn't necessarily have the consistent mentors and the tutelage and the trainers and all that. That didn't come till later. So I actually had to catch up. In order for me to catch up, I had to go so far beyond where I was at that incremental steps was not going to get me there in the time that I needed.
Mhm.
And I really wasn't satisfied with those kind of results because I knew that I had so much more in me that I had to quantum leap all the way to the end result of, being an Olympic athlete. And then, so basically what I did in practical measures is I just found out what do my favorite athletes do? You
Mhm.
know, simple thing, just modeling. Like, okay, what does a legitimate professional Olympic routine look like from a training perspective? Okay, cool. Let me take some of those things. Let me start putting that into my workout routine. And then eventually I built an entire framework based on those models and started applying that to where I was. So that's why I was training 3 times a day. That's what
Mhm.
Olympic athletes do. Okay, cool. Then let me do that, and then let me architect it, and then go from there. So it's kind of pulling the future possibility into the present moment, and then just working forward from the future. I think,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, that's exquisite because you're just closing the gap by going directly to that end result and living
Yeah.
it currently, which requires a capacity, to have a
Mhm.
capacity to make those huge leaps in life and
Well,
consciousness. Yes.
it's an identity transfer, right? Like we all too often we just become accustomed to who we've been. So we
Hmm.
just continue being that person. Maybe we make small little adjustments, small little upgrades. We upgrade our diet to some other diet, or we do these little incremental things. We pat ourselves on the back, and then um, we just keep going about our business, eating from the scraps of what's possible. But it's very rare, maybe more so now because the flood and abundance of information that we've never had before. There's more reference points, there's more examples of possibilities. So once somebody sees something, all of a sudden their imagination is stretched.
Hmm.
If we don't have those models, then it's a unique individual that can access that from within. But typically we need to see some evidence of something beyond where we're at for our life. And so I feel like it's really an identity thing, because for me, it wasn't like I was trying to be an Olympic athlete. I was an Olympic athlete and my actions reinforced that. It wasn't like, and here's the interesting dichotomy of it, is that it wasn't like I could just think I was an athlete and not live like it.
Hmm.
It doesn't work that way. It's one for one. I had to adopt the routines and rituals and behaviors of a professional athlete. Same thing as an author or as a teacher or entrepreneur. It's the same exact thing, where it's not like the actions get me to believe in myself. I believe in myself because of my actions.
Ah, yes. Huge. It's huge. And that's how integrity is built.
Right.
Hmm. Ah, so profound. So, okay. Hmm. There's still something that wants to come through around identification. So what I'm feeling into now is we've taken this journey on, well, we're speaking into reality creation and quantum leaping, but purpose. So how do we access that psychic field that you're talking about, of free energy flow, of epiphany, of revelation, of genius, of insight? That power is so vast and phenomenal. And we usually catch glimpses of it, but to really tap into that and stay connected to it, which is living from a pure flow state, instead of just activating it or accessing it spontaneously, but really embodying it. How does one do that? And so it's something that I've noticed in my own experience within my own self, is that I almost cannot have an identification of any sort whatsoever. I have to get outside of myself, get beyond myself. So either accessing that field or living through something so great, so far beyond me, that I am then supplied by that power source to fulfill that purpose, that mission, or that goal.
Okay, this is great. So what comes up for me immediately is that you have to master the basics before you can go beyond them. And when I think of the identity thing, like, when you're in that flow state, you're not thinking. That's the key. You're not even thinking, you're not planning, you're not predicting or anything. You're not being an identity. However, if we haven't established a healthy identity, or in Jungian terms, a healthy ego, then we can't really go beyond it, because we're actually subject to the shadow of it. So this has to do with developmental principles of integration. And then we can tap into flow states because we're standing on a foundation that anchors us. So whatever that quintessential aspect of us is, that can kind of transcend the physicality of our material existence and how we identify ourselves. Yeah, that's a really interesting point, because it's like it brings in this principle of like, have your head in the clouds, feet on the earth kind of thing. So you're not up in the clouds, right? You're not into fantastical theories or whatever that may or may not have anything to do with reality, but you're also not so gravitationally pulled to the material world where you become like scientismic, right? You buy into all these like hyper materialistic theories, and you can't actually think outside of the box. So you're trapped in those, those little dolls that have like, there's a little box and there's a bigger box and a bigger box. So every time you get out of a box, there's another box and there's another box. You can't ever escape it. So I think there's an integration between the physical world and the non-physical world. And that doesn't have to be, by the way, that doesn't have to be somebody's belief system. It's a transcendent experience that we're now beginning to like give language or some kind of reasonable articulation to.
That's exquisite. Merging the upper chakras with the lower chakras, and the physical with the non-physical, higher self, lower self, it just feels like identification with soul versus identification with archetypal constructs, because there's so many archetypes, and we're such fluid beings, and it's the whole nature of reality is transient. It's literally the only constant that we can rely on. So our capacity to adapt between moments seamlessly is our best chance at thriving in the flow of that genius. And so if we're identifying to a specific archetype or way of being, or a construct that we have created, an image we have created for ourselves, then we can start to, and I would say the more advanced or exponential stages of embodying flow, run into a lot of speed bumps, because it becomes less seamless, because you're trying to hold onto a frame or an image and live into it. And it stops you up, because that's not what's being called for in the next moment. And so if you feel into, when you're in a pure flow state, I mean, it is genius. It's higher intelligence. It's super conscious, intuitive awareness that you're living from. You're not even inside of yourself. The consciousness is steering the body, and the body is just flowing with it. So there's no focus on this whatsoever. Actually, all of the awareness is pointed outward and navigating and moving between moments. So there's a connection to an intelligence. Yes. So identifying with that, I feel like that that would create an exponential leap in consciousness, because are we taking those incremental steps, or taking a space to cultivate a self-image, or you know, even self-belief, beyond self-belief, it's into the space of knowingness.
Yeah. So that's the certainty principle, right? And so it's like, I like to trace these things back to how they develop, because it's one thing to say you need certainty, but it's a whole nother thing to actually have certainty.
Yes.
And so, you know, that's an individual journey, but that's why, so you have stages of development, right? Like self-confidence is really important. If you don't have self-confidence, if you're always looking down, if you're always on the lookout, you're living in survival, that kind of thing. Or you can't take the initiative, you can't get going, right? Like, then it's like, okay, then we need a higher level of stimulus or a higher quality of embodiment so we can get into the game. And then the more we get in the game, we become a little bit more comfortable, a little bit not afraid, you know, and then all of a sudden it goes into another level of like total confidence. And then eventually it's like, you hit a few home runs and you realize, or you get knocked down and then you get up and you're like, wow, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was. And then you keep doing that till it becomes almost like, it becomes a level of certainty through the practice of it. And that's why I think the rituals and the actions that align with said identity in the moment are so important, because congruency is everything. Right? I think Tony Robbins said that the strongest force in the human personality was to stay congruent with who we believe we are. And this brings up, I mean, so many different directions you can go, but then this brings up the whole self-sabotage thing. Like, why do we do the things we know we shouldn't do? Right? Like, and what is all that? And so I think it has a lot to do with our self-identity and putting ourselves, it's almost like we put other people on pedestals and we put ourselves in a pit. And so we're always looking up at other people without realizing that the people that we admire are actually showing us what's possible for ourselves. They're speaking to something within us. That's why it resonates, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, we're all calling the genius out of each other, and that's what we're attracted to. It's like, okay, I feel my own essence, my own quintessence, my own genius, my own soul light emanating through this being over here. And I want to learn how to awaken that within myself so that I can live it and experience it. And that's what the draw is. And we're all doing that for each other continuously, especially if we're living into the embodiment of our, higher intelligence. Yeah. So we're all just mirrors for each other. Absolutely. It's beautiful. This is such a good conversation. Thank you for your genius.
My pleasure.
Yeah,
There's
so many things that we could just do. Each of these could be its own series. I'm just like taking micro shots.
That's why I'm actually noticing it being a challenge. Usually I'm like really like laser dialed in on interviews, but this one in particular is interesting because there's like so many different cubby holes. But then I also realized the depth of every one of them. So it's like almost hard to like go deep into any particular one. I'm happy, that's why you have the reins of this whole thing. You can direct any way you want.
Well, it's just an exquisite example of what flow is and how eccentric it is, because this is what it does. This is how it dances. This is how it moves. It's wild. It's exotic. It's not, according to our sense of structure around things. And that's what also makes it exponential, because if we listen to it, tune into it, trust it, follow through on it, act on it, then things can accelerate in ways that are just way beyond our own images, our own imagination. So this is even getting into the field of beyond creation, beyond, all these tactics and strategies that we use to create our own reality and construct it. What if we can just access those flow states, live it? And you said something earlier around, let me see if I can draw it back in. It's one thing to have certainty, and there was another piece of that, to know you need certainty, or to...
Yeah, it was like, it's one thing to hear you need certainty. It's another thing to actually live it.
Right. So claiming it is what it feels like. So it's one, so this is the same thing to expedite all of our creations. It's one thing to want something. It's another thing to have it. It's another thing to claim it. So the energetic there is profoundly important. It's a subtlety, but it's important because with one, there's a separation and there's a gap. And with the other one, you're having it. So all the things that we try to get or try to achieve, instead of just having it in the present moment, in living the embodiment of that, and that opens up so much intelligence and higher consciousness to flow through us and actually close that gap. But there's creation is very literal in that way. So reality, the word reality actually has literal in it. You know, it's like it's so literal. And so becoming hyper conscious of what we're creating, what we're constructing, what we're choosing inside of every moment. And that allows for profound and instantaneous shifts. And then from that point, it's just about maintaining those shifts and continuing to choose them moving forward. And so, you know, leaping from, okay, I'm training at a certain level and now I'm going to take on the, you know, persona of an Olympic athlete and live into that flow. That's a massive leap for a lot of people. And it would, if there weren't a certain devotion or commitment or capacity that was available, then it would be easy to fall back into old patterns or lifestyle habits and then have to take those incremental steps. So that's a profound thing that you did, and an exquisite example of what's possible for all of us to make those choices and to just go to just select the reality that we want to live in, to select the embodiment, to be that person now, and to continuously choose it and continuously live into it.
Yeah. Well, I also had the I guess privilege of growing up really close to the personal development industry at a young age. So, you know, I really had this sense of a lot of that kind of success technology, information and insight. And one of the things I remember Jim Rohn saying was that the reason for having a goal is for becoming someone worthy of becoming. So like for me, you know, winning some like regional tournament or something wasn't going to like have exponential effects on my whole life. Right. And a lot of this is unconscious. A lot of this isn't like fully prepped or fully premeditated upon. It's just, there's an impulse, there's an inspiration, there's a vision. And honestly, I didn't know what else I was going to do with my life anyway, so I might as well go to the Olympics. You know, and so I felt like it was such a massive undertaking that it would consume my whole life. And part of that was also like, I wasn't going to college. I just had no interest in any of that. So it's kind of like, what else would I do? What else am I going to do? And I think the unconscious driver was that it was going to develop me and push me and transform me in ways that would leave a mark on me for the rest of my life. That would influence how I approach life, how I approach challenges. It would develop me into the person that I was meant to be.
Yeah. And that's really where the fulfillment is being that person and living into all those different dimensions of our own embodiment every single day. So good. Well, so this has been an absolutely amazing call, and I appreciate you so much for coming on and joining me. Is there anything that you would love to add before we hop off? And then I'm just going to ask you to please share with everybody who's tuning in where they can find you, anything that you are facilitating right now that you'd love to make people aware of and offer, please. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. Wow. Time really went by.
Yeah.
I guess I want to kind of drive in the whole thing around health and nutrition, because I know we kind of skimmed on it, and that's the body of my work. So, you know, I just want to like kind of drive in the importance of that. And we're talking about flow states. In my personal opinion, there's no way to activate even a fraction of our human potential. There are anomalies of people on this earth. There are X factors. There's monks. There's different types of people that kind of break that mold. But generally speaking, unless we really take that aspect really seriously and get focused on like upgrade our nutritional protocols, our lifestyle, our live it strategy instead of the diet strategy. We focus on the live it strategy and bringing in the living foods, the living juices, the superfoods, herbalism, living spring waters, so all those kind of things, just getting interested in that and experimenting with that. When we do that, we create more flow in our body, right? Our body is just kind of this like tubing system of all the ventricles and capillaries and the cardiovascular system and lymph system and nervous system. It's all just really a set and a harmonic system of tubes. So when those tubes get blocked up and congested, then, it cuts off flow, and, so within, so without, right? So we have to really if we want to activate more flow, then things like fasting or intermittent fasting or drinking 1 liter of water first thing in the morning, just to let everything flow. You'll notice there'll be more fluidity in your life. There'll be more synchronicities. There'll be more just this ease and just kind of more flow. That's where we start. From there, we can get infinitely more sophisticated. But I feel like I want to drive that in, and this idea of adopting more of a liquiditarian type of diet, which I know you're really into. I've been into that for, as long as I can remember being on this path. And it all started with living foods, water-rich foods, and then moving into smoothies and juices, and eventually becoming so nourished and so nutrified that I didn't really need solid food. Food became more entertainment. And then, it became basically just liquefying all my nutrition. From there, I feel like that's what has given me the ability to tap into meditative states or flow states on command, is because I'm not drawing energy from my body through digesting food all the time. All that energy is freed up, and now I can do something else with it.
Yeah, and you've just got this immaculate channel for that energy to flow through instead of all of your energy being allocated to digestion.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else that you want to dive into? We can keep going.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, we can keep going for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm here. You got me. So we can go down that. We can keep going down that train of thought. I mean, there's so many things that got brought up in this conversation. You mentioned, you didn't say the word, but you basically mentioned neurogenesis and neuroplasticity and kind of getting into the cognitive developmental science. And there's a lot of interesting things around nutrition and that play into that. So, I mean, I'm game to go in any direction you want for as long as you want to have me.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I almost said neurogenesis and I said neural pathways. It's so dead. But that unto itself is exquisite. And we can just speak into that for a minute, because what I recognize in myself is the more I'm optimized, the more that I optimize, and I require more to stay on that thread continuously. And so novelty has become something that is of supreme importance in my own experience, to keep my neurons generating new neurons, having new experiences, seeing new things, experiencing new environments, people, social interactions, connections. All of that has become extremely important because I adapt so rapidly. I absorb the data that is available to me. I synthesize it. I put it to practice in my own life, and I'm like, okay, and next, what is next? And so, yeah, let's speak into neurogenesis and how do we keep that flow open and expanding?
Yeah, brilliant. Well, so for everyone listening, neurogenesis is basically the regeneration of neurons. And so the old theory was that, you get a set amount of the neurons in your brain, and then that's all you got. Once they burn out, then you degenerate and you die. That's great. So just like everything, science is constantly being updated. It's not solidified. It never was. It never has been. It's always being updated. We're always discovering new things. Now we know we have more neurons in the brain than there are stars in the sky, apparently. So that's a whole different story. And so the idea behind this is that same thing with neuroplasticity, that your brain is plastic in the sense that it reshapes itself. It can remold itself, and the neural pathways can reassociate. So they can go from old associations, which usually have an emotional component, some kind of trauma or some kind of emotional impact that sequences synaptic neurons together, and then that creates like a pathway, and then it gets locked in. That's why patterns and thought patterns can be so hard to detach from, because they're more reinforced through stimulus, just call it energy. They get kind of tight and locked in. So we actually have to learn to like we were talking about before, is like to disassociate from who we were, so we can actually create new neural pathways and new ways of being. So that's really interesting, and that ties back into the identity piece. But I want to kind of focus on neurogenesis and neuroplasticity. So this is really, really exciting. And so there's a lot of cool things going on with nutrition and what people can do to actually accelerate the regeneration and repair of their their cognitive faculties, their brain and their nervous system. This has been a focus of my work for a while. And so one of the interesting things is magnesium actually increases neuroplasticity, which is really fascinating. Magnesium as a mineral is probably the biggest mineral deficiency, and it's the most important mineral. It's the number one mineral used by the human heart. 100% of heart disease, heart attack conditions always have a magnesium deficiency with them. And it also happens to be one of the key components for something called myelination. So that's just like the fatty insulation tube that surrounds the nerves. And when that gets oxidized, or if you have like mercury fragments that cross the blood-brain barrier, they actually start to slice off that myelin tubing, and then it starts to oxidize the nerves. So when people have like motor dysfunctions like Parkinson's or MS, they can't control their motor function, and their speed, become kind of speech impediment, and they just don't have control of their function. So their nervous system is essentially starting to unravel. So we want to know about that because we want to protect against that. We're being exposed by so much toxicity, it's unfathomable. It's actually, you can't even conceptualize how much toxicity is in our immediate environment. So basically what we need to do is we just need to protect ourselves. We need to know about certain things that are going to help the body self-regenerate, are going to help the nervous system and the brain protect itself. And also from there, once we're like fully formed and structured, and we got our health assurance policy in place, and we feel good about that, then we can go to the next step, which is like optimization, right? How do I increase learning potential? How do I accelerate learning potential? How do I, how do I do the things I want to do? And in other words, how do I upgrade this operating system from whatever iOS it was at to the next level, right? Mm-hmm. So we can continually do that. There's no limitation. There's no known limitation for that. So, it's a fascinating conversation. It goes into infinitely, many, many different rabbit holes, but just speaking about the brain, and that's just one component, is just magnesium. There's so many other things that go into that probably expand way beyond the conversation, but, yeah.
Well, so what are some key sources, highest sources of magnesium? Food.
Well, you'll love this.
Mm-hmm.
You'll love this. The number one source of magnesium is chocolate.
Yeah. I'm on top of it.
Yeah, on top of it, magnesium levels are filled up. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so actually cacao, which is where all chocolate comes from, is the number one source of magnesium, to the degree that it's actually like a magnesium supplement. Mm-hmm. Beyond that, chlorella would probably be number two, simply because chlorophyll, which is basically plant blood, is one of the highest sources of magnesium, and it drives magnesium right into the blood. Oh. So chlorophyll, the central molecule in chlorophyll is magnesium. The central molecule in our hemoglobin, otherwise known as our blood, is iron. So that's the only difference between our blood and plant blood, is just those two minerals. Mm-hmm. So, drinking a lot of green vegetable juices, green leafy juices. I tell people, if they're going to do green juice, put a tablespoon of either spirulina or chlorella in it and really make it like a bang for your buck. Like that is amazing. And both of those superfoods are super chalked up in chlorophyll. Trying to think, there's a lot of, and then you can look at like transdermal magnesium, topical magnesium, like magnesium gels or magnesium sprays, because you want to also not just ingest a lot of these high potency nutrients, but you also want to put them on your skin, because your skin is the largest organ in your entire body, and it has these little pores like plugs that plug into the blood and the lymph system. And so if you're putting like chemical laden sunscreens and cosmetic products onto your skin, that's going right into your blood. So that's really important to know about, and actually blocks up your pores and deteriorates the skin over time. So so we want to just reverse that, and then take in put on essential oils and different all organic types of cosmetics or body products, hygiene products, and then using transdermal magnesium. That's really powerful.
Yeah, that's huge. And I'm getting like steam rooms and eucalyptus saunas and skin brushing and all of the different things that we can do to constantly renew. Totally. Yeah, that's huge for me. Well, you know this. I'm so sensitive to energetics. Everything it has to be the purest ingredients so that my body can actually assimilate it, and just so that my skin can breathe too, because I can tell if I put anything on, even if it's just lotion, if I put on a lotion that's not just completely pure. So I use MCT oil on my body a lot as a primary.
Nice.
Yeah, and then all essential oils. Because your body is absorbing that, and that's why the environment is so important as well for activating our potential in our genetics, our epigenetics, and our DNA. Because what we're exposing ourselves to on all levels, we're taking it in, we're absorbing it into our system, into our bloodstream, and it's influencing our capacity to do everything.
To do everything, right?
Literally, yeah, because it's also interconnected and integral. That it impacts everything. So what's a high source of iron for vegans that you would recommend?
Okay, yeah, so you have heme iron and non-heme iron. So heme iron would obviously be like blood-based iron, which would be meat, right? When people hear it that way, by the way, it changes the whole context of like the typical, just like gonna go get my slab of meat or something. I'm not saying like you need to be vegan or vegetarian, but it's really important to start practicing more plant-based protocols. So that's the typical, I guess, go-to when it comes to iron for most people. Actually, cacao is the second largest source of iron. It's either the first or largest source of iron in any plant-based terrestrial or earth-based, meaning out of the sea, food. So that's another thing, another win for cacao and chocolate right there.
All you need is cacao and sunlight and some water.
Cacao, sunlight, water, maybe a coconut.
Yeah.
So also bringing up spirulina again. Spirulina is a huge source of plant-based iron. And one of the things with it too is that, first of all, I would never recommend anyone take like a traditional iron supplement, because iron as a metal is an oxidant. So it has to be in an organic form. If it's in an organic elemental mineral form, then it's not going to be bioavailable by your body. Same thing with calcium. Calcium supplements are actually one of the worst things you can do. So you want to get those. Now there's other mineral there's distinctions there. It doesn't mean all mineral supplements are bad, but those two in particular are completely like no go-tos. You need to get it from food. Another high source of iron is actually red foods. So when you look at the color of food, the colors have codes built into them. And actually minerals and certain nutrients have a color association with them, which is interesting. So when you look at red foods, like red meat obviously is a source, but then you look at things like watermelon, and beets.
Mm-hmm.
Beet is actually one of the highest sorts of beetroot, the root of the beet particularly, whether it's you're juicing the beet or you're steaming or cooking the beet, or you're doing beet powdered extracts, which I really love. That's a super high source of iron right there. So we got spirulina, we got cacao, we got beetroot, watermelon, any red foods. Tomatoes are going to be not so much, but they're going to be there. You know, throw those in your salad or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those. Yeah, I don't know if I haven't done the mineral analysis of strawberries. Strawberries are great. We love strawberries.
Mm-hmm. Beets are obviously the most potent.
The beets are the most potent. Yeah.
Right. So brain on. What do you feel about that?
Brain on. Oh, brain on. I'm trying to go back to that product.
Mm-hmm.
Remind me of it. It's been a long time since
yeah, me too. That's why I was asking you, because off the top of my head, I can't recall exactly what is in it, but it's supposed to be a very potent, concentrated chlorophyll's coming through. It's green.
Yeah. It's the E3 Live product.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I now remember. Yeah, that was way back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
It's great. It's great. There's other things I'd probably recommend that are going to be more potent. I think Brain On's great. I haven't used it in a good 7 or 8 years, so that tells you just kind of where I'm at with that. But it's basically like a blue-green algae, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what other dimensions were we going to traverse? So neurogenesis. I mean, and this goes into all of this is so interconnected with optimization. And when I feel into optimization, I just feel thrival. Our capacity to be in that flow of our quintessential nature and to live joyously, creatively into each moment, to really thrive physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially, creatively, and our self-expression, our relationships, and all of this. And health is obviously the number one. It's a foundational piece for all of everything else to unfold.
Yeah.
So this has been a huge one for me in my life, and I know that it is for a lot of people on the planet. So I just want to tune into and dive into this for a while, the gut brain connection and keeping everything digesting. So my channel is phenomenally clean and pure. And because of that, I'm highly sensitive to any type of disruptions that are happening in my electrical system, my cosmic circuitry, all of this. And I notice that most prominently in my stomach and my power center when I'm digesting new energies, because it's such a massive amount of energy and codes that I'm calling to ground in. So what are some things that we can do to keep our digestion fluid? I mean, that's what it feels like for me, just keeping it flowing.
Okay, that's a great question. Well, there's a few different angles for it. One of the things that I recommend people get into, if they haven't already, is colon hydrotherapy. Mm-hmm. So doing different forms of colonics, going and setting up an appointment with a local colon hydrotherapist, particularly someone that does something called an open system, which you kind of have control over. That's my favorite. And, colonics are incredible. What they can do for you, just cleaning out all the gunk over the years that just kind of builds up and gets cemented around the intestinal lining. Once you have that cleared out of you, I mean, talk about flow, things open up exponentially. And, I could go a lot deeper into that, but that's just something I want to put on people's radar, is colon hydrotherapy, getting colonics, getting regular colonics. I mean, it's probably one of the most intimate things you could do with a partner. So if you're sussing someone out, engaging is this the right one? Can we share intimacy together? It's take it out of the bedroom and take it to the colon hydrotherapy place, and then see if you two are a match. I don't mean I don't mean look at your stool and see if you're a match. I just mean if you two are anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, as far as the gut brain connection, so we're talking about the microbiome. Mm-hmm. And so the microbiome is your inner ecosystem. It's it's mostly your digestive system, but it's also what lives on top of your skin, in your oral cavity, in your colon. It's throughout the entire body. And it's basically all the beneficial symbiotic organisms, particularly the bacterial organisms, that make up most of who we are. Mm-hmm. So from a factor of like 9 out of 10, we're 9 out of 10 beneficial bacteria to 1 out of 10 cells that make up who we are. So that's pretty significant. So this is multifaceted. Basically, to kind of get right into it, you have to gauge where you're at. So if you have digestive challenges, I don't mean you, but anyone listening, if somebody has digestive challenges, maybe a bloating, maybe you have like candida symptoms or what's called leaky gut syndrome, then it's going to be a little bit of a different approach. For the most part, we need to get fermented foods into our diet. These are cultured foods that have been fermenting in a certain medium that allow those beneficial bacteria to actually emerge, so we can colonize our inner ecosystem and create a symbiotic environment of beneficial bacteria that can go up and clean up all of the waste products that were produced from non-symbiotic organisms, which we call invasive or opportunistic organisms. Yeast, mold, fungus, parasites, not beneficial bacteria, viruses, fungi, all that kind of stuff. And that's quite an in-depth conversation in of itself. Right. So to some degree, everybody's dealing with this, because we all grew up on a standard American diet. We all, to some extent, most of us are making our way out of that. So, from antibiotics, or if you were born with a C-section, you didn't get breastfed as a child, all those factors are extremely important in this. So, fermented foods is extremely important. Probiotics and prebiotics is a huge topic that people are focused on, and that's pretty in depth. There's obviously all kinds of different products, but I think I like to go straight to cultured foods in the fermented vegetables in particular, and either I'll eat those on their own, or I'll put those in my salad, because the salad and the roughage of the salad has the prebiotic fibers that actually feed the probiotics. Mm-hmm. So the probiotics actually feed on prebiotics. Mm-hmm. And so you can't just throw probiotics in your body and like hope that they're going to bypass your stomach acid and just hope that they're going to land and drop ship. Like there's a whole colonizing process that goes on here. Because again, like your inner ecosystem is a living environment. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the number one thing, is that you have to realize that life begets life. So if we're putting in like antibiotics, we're basically throwing a nuke in an ecosystem and hoping that something will grow afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. One other thing that's coming to my mind that's going to be helpful for everyone is that without knowing what somebody may be dealing with, one of the universal things that I like to get people on is activated charcoal.
Yes.
So if anyone has any bloating or any stomach issues or any food poisoning, anything whatsoever, taking either like a tablespoon or maybe 6 to 8 capsules of activated charcoal. It can be hardwood charcoal, it can be coconut charcoal, doesn't really matter. And taking that will help to neutralize any pathology, any pathogens, any infections, any fermentation, any toxins whatsoever will actually be magnetically pulled to the surface of the charcoal, and then it can be chelated or eliminated out of the body through the elimination tract, right? Mm-hmm. So this is something I'd actually recommend everybody get onto anyways, because just for the toxicity that we're dealing with, we need to be taking in extraction materials, whether that's like bentonite clay, it's zeolite clay, it's activated charcoal, it's chlorophyll, it's chlorella, anything that's going to help mop up the residual toxicity is not even, it's not a luxury, it's a necessity. It just has to be. So cleansing has to be part of our nutrition program now. It's not like, oh, I'm going to go do my 21-day cleanse now. It's like, no, that's what I do in the morning. Like, I don't eat breakfast, whatever that is. I don't do that. Like, because the word breakfast means to break a fast. Like, I don't eat like pancakes and whatever all that is or was. It's in the ash bin of history, and I don't even relate to that anymore, because I learned something about your cleansing cycle, which is that from about, like 4 or 5 a.m. all the way to 11 or 12 noon, your body's in a catabolic cleansing cycle. So that's not the time to be putting in caloric, dense foods. That actually stops your detoxification pathways. So you want to be flowing, you want to be drinking fluids, tea, water, juices, maybe a smoothie, like a detox lemonade or something, whatever your deal is. That's when you take in some of your high potency supplements in the morning on an empty stomach. And then, eventually you migrate into solid foods throughout the day. So knowing that piece of information is extremely important, because once you start practicing it and you start applying kind of more of a liquid-based protocol, everything just changes. Everything optimizes. You feel better. You're looser. You're more flexible. Your body's not as like, inflammation isn't as present in the body, and it frees up your mind.
Yes, it does. It absolutely frees up your mind and your energy. I mean, maybe some days, so it's anywhere between 1 and 3 is when I have, even I'll make a smoothie is the first thing that I have during the day, and I may have another one later in the day. And occasionally I'll have solid food at the end of the day, which looks something like fruits or salad of some kind. Sometimes I still do. I still do eggs, although I had some the other day and it wasn't agreeing with me. So I can always tell when I'm optimizing, because all these little shifts happen. And so I'll go into a space and place where I'll do vegan and pretty darn close to raw. I mean, I would say like 90 to 95% raw, and I'll do that for months. And then my body needs something more dense and protein rich. And that's where I go to eggs and try to incorporate some nut butters or something like that. But that solid meal for me is always at the end of the day. But particularly if I've been doing a ton of energy work and moving energy, for me, it feels
right.
It's connected into the emotional content of whatever it is that I'm experiencing. So I have to be on top of it with keeping my field really clean and pure, and doing my own activations and clearing my own field and aura after all of that, so that energy doesn't stick in me. But then also nutrient wise, not giving it anything to stick into. So I'm always looking at like, how can I be invincible to my environment without allowing it to have the greater impact on me? Because on some level, because it's all relationship, it's still going to impact me somewhat, but how can I become the dominant?
So you're going to need more fat intake and different types of fats that create a buffer, because that's one of the things fats do, is they create a buffer through the cell membrane, so you're not as penetrable. One of the things that happens when people go on low fat diets, particularly women, is they tend to lose their cycle, and they tend to have hormonal imbalances, because your cholesterol is such an important substance for forming healthy hormones, and so you need that from certain types of fats. But then also your nervous system, someone like you who's like basically a free energy generating conductive device yourself, you need to those nerves have to be soothed. They have to be insulated. That myelin sheath has to stay insulated. And it's made out of 80% fat or 90% fat or something. The rest is like amino acids.
Yeah. Well, and that's probably why
Yeah. I was just going to say, like, having the right amount or the right kinds of free form amino acids, and also for your neurotransmitters, because they're built out of amino acids. So that's probably, a lot of that probably explains some of the protein craving. And then the actual fat, like whether it's avocado, it's olives, olive oil, cacao, the butter in cacao particularly, whether that is ghee butter or that's omega-3 fatty acids, which is really, really key for brain formation and for the nerve fibers. That's probably what I'm sensing, is you want to keep that electrical conductivity flowing, right? The communication circuit. And if it starts to get worn out or fatigued, then then I can see how that would be a problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean that exactly perfectly describes eggs, cholesterol, amino acids.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Great on the cacao front.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's incredibly helpful. Thank you. That's an easy fix. It's an easy addition. Yeah, upgrade. Thank you.
We'll get that taken care of.
Mm-hmm. We'll just add some coconut oil into
that was what I forgot to mention. Coconut oil is extremely powerful for that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So beautiful. Any other dimensions that you want to dance into?
I mean,
I feel like you and I, we could just go and go and go.
Yeah, we could do this. We could do this indefinitely. So maybe might be a good idea to put a little pause on this, and then we can circle back around and.
Yeah. Well, we've already got workshops planned out, so this is going to be.
Yeah, people don't. We're just kind of like playing along with it. People don't really know what we have in the works right now. So,
well, it's great because we can take all of those streams that are such rich, dense packets of knowledge and wisdom and information and gnosis and really give them to people at a whole new level because they can each be their own workshop. Right.
And really, that's the challenge with this not a challenge with the conversation, but in terms of like the depth that it wants to go into and the framework and the organization of it right now, it kind of like feels like a lot of spread out pieces in the conversation, but there's a deep framework and there's a depth to every single talking point that I'd love to go into. And I know that that's what we want to do.
Yeah. So wait, what are those restaurants that you can go to and you can order a little bit of everything, of the main?
Like buffets.
No, not a buffet. They're nicer. They're a little bit more. It's when you go to like fine dining and they have these delicious meals that are available, and they have these plates or these platters that you can get where you get to sample a little bit. That's what I feel like we just did with our conversation.
Yeah. This is a sampler plate.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely. It's just a teaser. Great. But absolute brilliance and so much helpful, useful, superb information that's shown through for everybody who's going to be tuning in. So thank you just for your breadth and depth of wisdom and intelligence and expertise in multiple areas and dimensions. I'm so excited to go deep and wide with you on so many different topics and really just support people on all these levels. And, there's a couple of things that you're launching right now. So if you'd love to share those, please do, and let people know where they can connect with you.
Cool. Thank you. So people can just go to my website. There we go. RonnieLandis.net, www.RonnieLandis.net. That's like really where like my body of work and tons of videos, my podcast, online courses. I have 2 online courses, an entire course on tonic herbalism, and then an entire, pretty much like a holistic health mastery academy. And it's called the Holistic Health Mastery Program. You can find that on my website. So I'm relaunching a huge part of my mentorship practice, and there's a program that I'm launching. It's a 10-week mentorship program. It's a 10-week trying to find the light. The sundown is coming right in on me. So it's a 10-week mentorship program. It's called the Visionary Life Mastery Program, and that is about to launch in the next day or 2. So I basically take 20 people through a facilitated group experience. It's a 10-week process, and we have 10 pillars or 10 quadrants that we go deep into, and it's a holistic life mastery program, which includes the physical, the emotional, the psychological, mental, the spiritual, the vocational, meaning your not your occupation, but your vocation, which is what you're here to do in the world, and also tying that with a form of exchange. So you could call that creating your own business or whatever it is, but it's more of a deeper sense of a purpose that you construct you build the rest of your life around that. Then the financial aspect, prosperity and abundance, and and really aligning your life with your mission, you know, what you're here to do. Ultimately, all of my work really comes down to that core principle is really finding out what you love to do, and then finding a way to only do what you love to do. That's kind of like the end game of all of this. That's why we're trying to optimize ourselves on all levels, because that's ultimately what we're trying to achieve here on this planet.
I love you so much. You just right to the core.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you can connect with me on Facebook. That website isn't fully launched yet, so it'll be launching really soon. So just, you know, connect with me on Facebook, follow me on there. You can find a ton of stuff that I'm doing. Send me a direct message, connect with me, and we can go from there.
Yes, it's going to be absolutely profoundly life-changing and life-enhancing and fun and optimizing for everyone who joins. You are the best of the best of the best at what you do, and there's just nowhere else that I would go, and that says a lot, because I'm incredibly sensitive and particular and honed in, dialed into all of these multiple topics that you cover, and I trust you explicitly. So if you're, if you, thank you for your mastery and all that you bring forth into the world. And if you guys are tuning into this and you're looking for support in those areas, and specifically health, this is your man. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me as well. It has been an absolute honor and a pleasure to have you on. Man, I can't wait to do this so much more together. And so what I'm going to do now, and thank you guys, everyone who's tuning in, who has joined us. Love you all so much. And we will connect with you on our next Levelocity session.